I have to say I'm a progressive who is challenging power. And I'm glad to have met Darren, who furthered that, who I listened to on the radio and said, hey, here's a guy that will stand up for the truth, not worried about the cost. And I've never seen him back down from it since. Nobody lives a perfect life. Don't anybody look at me and say, how does he dare pass opinion? He only has a journalism degree and a literature degree. He didn't go to Berkeley Law School or journalism school at Columbia. No, I'm not going to listen to that. And I'm not going to point anybody's life and say intelligence or how pure you are in mind or anything doesn't allow you to get a perspective and get a point of view. And if you're a Mr. Nowhere man and you don't have that perspective, get it. And if you disagree with my perspective or Darren Gibson's perspective, that's fine. You just tell me what formulated that, give me some facts behind it, and I'll gladly listen to it. But don't be a Mr. Nowhere man. Don't be a guy who's going to plant his life on the couch looking at propaganda and mainstream media consumerism.
Yeah. And just for the record, my little bit of activeness came from my father. I grew up in a union family. My dad was a union carpenter. 42 and a half years he was a member of the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America. He was the vice president of his local. He at one point ran for the executive council. My oldest brother is a retiree of the International Union of Operating Engineers. My middle brother was a member of the Laborers Union when he was in construction. He was a member of the American Postal Workers Union. I was a member of the American Postal Workers Union. And, you know, I grew up in a union family. I went to marches. As a kid, I went to the Labor Day marches in Detroit. We'd get on a bus in Grand Rapids. I'd ride down with my dad. We'd get on a bus at the Union Hall, which isn't very far from where we record this show, or it was at the time. And we would get on the bus and we would go down to Detroit. And we would march in the parade every Labor Day. Or I did it for a couple of years. But then we started having the Labor Day parades in Grand Rapids, and I would partake in those. I partook in one or two of those. I'm not out in the streets anymore. My anxiety and my mental illness kind of stops me from getting involved as much as I probably should. But I'm going to get on this air every single time, and I'm going to tell the truth. I don't care what it costs. I've lost a lot. Mm-hmm. And one thing, I really want to go this direction, Jack, because, you know, there's a lot of people that say, you know, we talked about the economics of it. Oh, well, you know, you're at a point of privilege, you can go out and protest. Well, I want to read this. This is something that I posted 1 year ago, and it came up in my Facebook memories, and I just wanted to share it. This was a post that somebody wrote. I don't know if it was on Twitter or if it was on Facebook, but this was a woman who was out buying groceries and got shamed because she used an EBT card to pay for her groceries. And I want to read this exchange that she wrote. She said, "Fam, I'm shook. I'm not okay. I knew I shouldn't have left the house. It was just a weird feeling day anyway, but I had to pick up my script and get groceries, and I have to work tomorrow, so we went grocery shopping, her and her son. I get all of our groceries. Her son is over in the toy department. She grabs them before they go to the checkout, and he says, maybe please get this toy. It's a Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. A little more than I wanted to spend, but he's so excited about it, so I say okay. So we're happy. We're being checked out. Jake shows everyone his clubhouse, and the people in line are smiling at him because that's what normal people do when a child is showing them a new toy that they're excited about. Except the one 70-ish woman in line behind me who has been looking at my hand quite a few times and getting very frustrated because we have a lot of flavored waters that have to be rung up separately. Lots of huffs and puffs. I ignore her until it comes time to pay. I swipe my EBT card that I had been holding in my hand, and it turns out that's what she has been staring at, because she says, if you can buy your son a toy with your money, you don't need to be buying groceries with my money. I turned to her and said, "Excuse me, what did you just say?" And she says really loudly in the crowded line, "I said you should be paying for your own groceries with your own money instead of mine."
Wow.
And she looks around the line like they're going to congratulate her or something. They're just looking away, except for the cashier, who is just horrified.
Yeah.
I said very quietly, "Jake, go over to the subway and sit down and wait for me, please." So he does. And I turn to this complete garbage person once I know my son can't hear me, and I ask, "Do I have your Visa card in my hand? What the are you saying, you dumb, evil..." The word that rhymes with hunt. And she says she's so tired of paying for everyone else, and they don't work, and she pays taxes. And I said, "What the are you talking about? I work, I pay taxes, so your ugly entitled boomer ass can have Medicare and everything else thing that FICA takes from my check." She says she never took a dime from the government, and she doesn't have to pay for those who do. And I said, "You with your never took a dime. Everything you do is federally subsidized, but you think you pay for everything. You don't pay for you." I tell her that her generation had literally everything handed to them and then kicked the ladder out from beneath everyone else, and that I bust my ass at a job where I literally don't even sit down unless I have to urinate, and that if I didn't work, it still wouldn't be okay. I tell her she's garbage for trying to embarrass me and my son, that she's so garbage her family probably hates her because she doesn't have a soul, and that she's lucky she'll be dead soon because otherwise she'd be catching hands from me. Meanwhile, the cashier has disappeared. The cashier comes back with the store manager, and I'm like, great. She's telling this guy that I'm abusing an old lady, and I steel myself for what I think is coming. But here's what happened. The manager asked the woman behind me to surrender her cart and please leave the store because abusing customers and trying to shame them when they are buying groceries legally isn't part of their policy. OMG, her face, the look on her face. It felt so good, that look on her face, OMG. And she starts saying she's going to call the police, and the guy says, "You can do that outside, off of our property," and had a bagger take her cart away. He takes my cart and says he'll take my groceries out for me, and we grab Jake. He buys Jake a drink of Subway and go to my car where he puts all of my groceries in my trunk and hugs me because I'm crying now. He tells me that anyone with EBT is welcome in his store and that he hopes he sees me again soon, and he admires Jake's toy. Like normal people do. Fam, this isn't apocryphal. It happens every day to people on assistance. You've seen the letters to the editor saying they've seen us buy a lobster and find receipts on the ground with like $5,000 in EBT credit on them. This is real. You know, never mind that I already paid for all this when I was single and in the 38% tax bracket. Never mind that those boomers have never paid for on their own. This country has enough money for the largest arsenal in the world. It has money to feed everyone. Nobody says you have to help us or approve of us, whatever that means, but you don't have to put your boots on our necks either. Mind your own damn business. Also, I don't think I've ever used the C word so many times in public ever.
Well, Darren, I'd like to comment on that. Mm-hmm. The shaming that took place there, you see way too much of that. And
absolutely.
There's no way it can be justified. And I think that she should have been addressed. I don't necessarily agree with the boomer thing that she's paying for all the boomer policies or boomer advantages that they got. What the boomers got, this generation should get. In other words, it's like people that say, "Oh, man, you got a pension. That's terrible. You shouldn't get a pension." No, wait a second. I should have a pension, and you should have a pension.
And everybody should have a pension.
Right. And the boomers that got a Social Security benefit while they worked, you should get the Social Security benefit. Don't blame the boomers for that. You're looking at a normal tax situation back in the 50s and the 60s, and we don't have that now. We have corporations getting a much lower percentage of tax. We have the rich getting much lower. That's the problem. It's not that the boomers were taking too much. It's that the political system today is not funding those social programs like they are in France. Like I was at the checkout line the other day, and the woman said something about France, and I said, yeah, in France, if you were pregnant, gave birth, you get a year of a government-paid nanny to come to your house, wash your dishes, wash the diapers, et cetera, et cetera. You get a 2-week paid vacation guaranteed. It's the law. Then you won't be dragging around into dredges of depression and suffering from postpartum depression, whatever they call it, after birth.
Yes.
And having all that because you get help. That's the normal atmosphere. That's what we should have. But
is.
I want to add one thing. We talk about direct action. That woman took direct action away. She confronted this person who was trying to shame her.
Yes.
I think that's good. Okay?
Yes.
I think it's also good what Noam Chomsky said when he was a kid. They were calling some kid fat on the playground, and nobody would stand and intervene. I've got an article here from the State Journal of a 13-year-old at Everett, where I live nearby, Everett High School. This would be Everett Middle School. 7th grader committed suicide here because he was being picked on, because they were pushing him down, et cetera. And one of the school, workers did a study and gave it to the police. And they found this kid was failed over and over again. But I'll tell you where he's failed, first of all. There wasn't a kid that stood in between him and the bullies. There wasn't a kid somewhere like Noam Chomsky. That's where he started his progressivism. When he stood up and committed direct action and said, knock it off. Leave this kid alone. Back off.
Yeah.
That's direct action, folks. And that's what you want to look for a place to start? Start right there.
Yeah.
Stand for the truth and stand for those who are being abused, whether it's the immigrants having their families taken away from them, whether it's a woman being shamed because she's black or she has what do you call the Muslim hair?
Yeah, hijab.
Yeah. She's being attacked for that. Stand up and say, knock it off. Leave them alone.
Exactly. And something I've said on this show a bunch of times, if you shame poor people, that makes you an asshole. So you better think about that. That's going to wrap things up for this special episode of Southpaws. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
For our announcer, Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.